After a wealthy husband left her destitute, Concepcion found herself navigating the turbulent waters of life as a taxi driver with her young son by her side. On a pivotal morning, as the first rays of sunlight gently caressed the horizon, Concepcion turned the key in the ignition of her weary yellow cab. The city was still in slumber, the streets blanketed in an early morning hush, and the crisp air whispered against her cheeks, reminding her of the world's fresh possibilities. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Driving a taxi hadn't been her lifelong aspiration, rather. It had become a necessary lifeline in the wake of a heart-wrenching divorce. Each day behind the wheel was a testament to her resilience and determination to forge ahead, despite the deep emotional scars left by her former life. As she maneuvered through the almost empty streets, Concepcion felt a blend of melancholy and hope. The city was waking up slowly, and with it, her dreams of rebuilding her life alongside her son. Despite the challenges she faced, Concepcion embraced her new reality with a fierce sense of purpose. The yellow cab, though battered and worn, was a symbol of her strength and unwavering commitment to providing a better future for her little boy. As the morning sun cast a golden glow over the cityscape, Concepcion's heart swelled with both the weight of past struggles and the bright promise of the future she was determined to create. As she wove through the streets, Concepcion observed the passing buildings, each one holding a history of its own. She often wondered about the different paths her life might have taken had things turned out differently. However, there was no room for regret. She had a son to raise and a life to reconstruct. In the back seat, her 7-year-old son, Philippe, slept peacefully in his car seat. His steady breathing and innocent face were constant reminders of why she persevered. Philippe was her greatest source of comfort and inspiration, his smile and laughter instilling hope even during the darkest times. As she lovingly glanced in the rearview mirror, Concepcion saw Philippe stir gently in his sleep. "My brave little warrior," she mused tenderly. "Every sacrifice I make is for you." While idling at a traffic light, the painful memories of her devastating divorce surged back like an unwelcome tide. Santiago, her ex-husband, had initially been the epitome of charm, but his insatiable ambition and greed had morphed him into a stranger. Manipulating forged documents and a falsified paternity test, Santiago had ruthlessly stripped away all their assets, leaving Concepcion and Philippe destitute and homeless. The judge had ruled in Santiago's favor, and Concepcion was cast out, forced to start anew with nothing but her willpower. The image of Santiago's arrogant, triumphant face was burned into her memory, yet she refused to let bitterness take root in her heart. She had to remain strong for Philippe. As the traffic light turned green, Concepcion pulled herself from the depths of her thoughts. With a deep, fortifying breath, she refocused on the road ahead. The day was just beginning, and countless miles awaited her. Throughout her workday, Concepcion navigated the city streets, while Philippe slumbered peacefully in the back seat. Memories of her life with Santiago overwhelmed her, a bittersweet cocktail of nostalgia and heartache. It had been more than a decade since their paths first crossed at a friend's gathering. Santiago's charm had been irresistible, his smile capable of lighting up the darkest room. Concepcion had fallen head over heels for his charisma and drive. The early years of their marriage were blissful, filled with shared dreams and aspirations. But Santiago's relentless pursuit of success had slowly eroded the love that once bound them. As his ambition grew, so did the distance between them. The man she had once adored had become a distant memory, replaced by someone driven by greed. The betrayal was a wound that cut deeply, as Santiago manipulated the legal system to rob her of everything, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and her precious son by her side. Despite the heartache, Concepcion knew she couldn't let the past dictate her future. She had to keep moving forward, for Philippe's sake. Each mile she drove was a testament to her resilience and determination to build a better life. The city's buildings blurred together as she focused on her destination, her resolve strengthening with every turn of the wheel. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow over the city, Concepien's determination burned brighter. She was not just driving a taxi, she was steering her life towards a brighter future. The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but with Philippe as her guiding light, she knew she could conquer any obstacle. Santiago was a man fueled by ambition, tirelessly striving to create a business empire from the ground up. Concepcion stood by him through every challenge, wholeheartedly believing in his dreams and the bright future he painted for them. Together, they invested in a stunning home, envisioning it as the perfect place to raise their children and grow old together. However, as Santiago's business success soared, so did his insatiable greed. Concepcion began to notice unsettling changes in him. Long hours at work morphed into frequent, unexplained absences, and their once harmonious conversations were replaced by constant arguments about money and their future. Santiago became increasingly distant and controlling, his love seemingly evaporating into a chilling coldness that Concepcion couldn't fathom. The breaking point came when Concepcion unearthed irrefutable evidence of Santiago's infidelities. Photographs, text messages, and hotel receipts confirmed the painful truth she had long suspected but desperately hoped was not real. Confronting him only led to a web of lies and manipulation. Santiago deflected blame by accusing her of paranoia and jealousy. Desperate to protect Philippe and secure a stable future for them both, Concepcion decided to file for divorce. She believed that justice would prevail, armed as she was with compelling evidence of Santiago's betrayals and emotional abuse. But Santiago, with his cunning and resources, had meticulously orchestrated everything. The divorce proceedings turned into a nightmare. Santiago presented forged documents and a fabricated paternity test, falsely claiming Philippe was not his son. He leveraged his wealth and influence to manipulate the legal system to his advantage. Heartbroken, Concepcion watched as the judge ruled in Santiago's favor, leaving her homeless and penniless. With Philippe by her side, Concepcion found herself with no choice but to start over from scratch. The image of Santiago's arrogant, victorious smirk was seared into her mind, yet she resolved not to let bitterness consume her. She needed to be strong for Philippe and rebuild their lives from the ground up. Snapping back to the present, Concepcion shook her head to dispel the painful memories. The sun had risen higher, and the city was now buzzing with the morning rush. She glanced at Philippe, still sleeping peacefully, and felt a renewed surge of determination. This is just the beginning, she thought. Together we will find a way forward. With that firm resolve, Concepcion continued her route, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. She knew the journey ahead would be long and difficult, but with Philippe by her side, no obstacle seemed insurmountable. As the sun climbed higher, Concepcion turned onto a new street. Philippe had woken up a few minutes earlier, rubbing his eyes with his small hands and yawning widely. With a sleepy smile, he sat up in his seat, ready to accompany his mother through another workday. "Good morning, Mom," Philippe said softly, his voice filled with love. "Good morning, my love," Concepcion replied, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "Did you sleep well?" Philippe nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I had a beautiful dream. We were in a big house with a garden full of flowers." Concepcion's heart swelled with emotion at her son's innocence and hope. "That sounds wonderful, Philippe. One day we will have our own garden, you'll see." As they navigated the bustling city streets, Concepcion made several stops to pick up and drop off passengers. Each customer brought their own unique story, and although Concepcion rarely engaged deeply in their conversations, she often found herself contemplating the myriad lives that intersected with hers. At one stop, she picked up an elderly woman named Dona Marta, a regular passenger who always greeted Concepcion with a warm smile and kind words. As Dona Marta settled into the seat, Philippe, ever the generous soul, offered her one of his cookies, which she accepted with heartfelt gratitude. "You are such a generous boy," Philippe Dona Marta said, patting his head affectionately. "Thank you, Dona Marta," Philippe replied, his face lighting up with a radiant smile. After dropping Dona Marta off at her destination, Concepcion and Philippe made their way to a small cafe they often visited for a break. The owner, Dona Rosa, always treated them with special kindness. Upon seeing them enter, Dona Rosa greeted them with enthusiasm. "Concepcion, Philippe, it's wonderful to see you. Shall I prepare your usual orders?" she asked. Concepcion nodded appreciatively. "Yes, please, Dona Rosa. A coffee for me and an orange juice for Philippe." As they waited for their orders, Concepcion seized the moment to talk to Philippe about his day. "Do you enjoy accompanying me in the taxi, Philippe?" she asked, her eyes full of curiosity and warmth. Philippe nodded eagerly, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I do, Mom. I like seeing all the different people and hearing their stories. It makes every day an adventure." Concepcion smiled, touched by her son's enthusiasm. "I'm glad to hear that, my love. You make every day brighter for me too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Dona Rosa soon arrived with their drinks, placing a steaming cup of coffee in front of Concepcion and a refreshing glass of orange juice in front of Philippe. "Enjoy, my dears," she said with a smile, before returning to her work.
Concepcion sipped her coffee, feeling the warmth spread through her, and looked out at the busy street. Despite the hardships they had faced, moments like these reminded her of the simple joys in life and the unwavering bond she shared with Philippe. With every challenge they overcame together, her resolve grew stronger. She knew that as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't face.
Philippe nodded eagerly. "Yes, Mom. I enjoy seeing the city and meeting new people, but sometimes it makes me a little tired." Concepcion gently stroked her son's cheek. "I understand, my love. But soon we'll find a way so you won't have to spend so much time in the car. I'm working on it." Dona Rosa then appeared with their drinks and a plate of freshly baked rolls. "These are on the house," she said warmly. "I know how hard things are for you, but I truly admire your determination, Concepcion." Concepcion expressed her gratitude to Dona Rosa, and they quietly enjoyed their snack, relishing the brief moment of calm. She understood how vital these serene moments were for both Philippe and herself. After their short break, they returned to the taxi. Concepcion was acutely aware of the long hours still ahead, but she remained steadfast. Each day was a step closer to a more hopeful future. As dusk settled, they picked up their final passenger, a businessman engrossed in a seemingly endless phone call. Philippe, worn out, dozed off once more in his seat. Concepcion gazed at him tenderly, her heart brimming with love and resolve. "Soon, Philippe," she murmured softly. "Soon everything will be better for us." With that heartfelt promise echoing in her soul, Concepcion navigated back home, mentally bracing herself for the next day's trials. She knew that as long as Philippe was by her side, there was no challenge too great to overcome. The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of orange and pink as Concepcion and Philippe continued their workday. Concepcion knew the day was nearing its end, but there was one final task to complete before they could head home. The dispatcher called, requesting her to pick up 2 passengers at the bus station. "Philippe, darling, we have one last stop before we can go home," Concepcion said, glancing at her son who was engrossed in playing with a small toy car in the back seat. "Okay, Mom," Philippe replied with a bright smile. Upon arriving at the bus station, Concepcion spotted 2 identical men in dark suits standing on the sidewalk. They were Daniel and Marcos, twins with stern expressions and piercing gazes that sent a shiver down Concepcion's spine. Despite her slight unease, she took a deep breath and opened the rear door to let them in. "Good evening, gentlemen," Concepcion greeted them politely, trying to mask her discomfort. The twins exchanged a brief, silent glance before stepping into the back seat. Daniel, the one on the left, gave a curt nod, while Marcos remained stoic. The air inside the taxi grew heavy with their presence, and Concepcion could feel the tension settling in. As she drove, Concepcion kept her eyes on the road, stealing occasional glances at Philippe through the rearview mirror. He continued to play with his toy car, blissfully unaware of the tension in the air. The men in the back seat spoke in hushed tones, their voices low and serious, adding to Concepcion's unease. "Mom, are we going home soon?" Felipe's innocent voice broke the silence, his question filled with the simplicity of a child's world. "Yes, my love. Just a little longer," Concepcion reassured him, her voice gentle yet firm. The city lights began to flicker on as they drove through the streets, casting a warm glow on the buildings and pavements. Concepcion's mind raced with thoughts of their day, the challenges they had faced, and the promise she had made to Philippe. She was determined to make things better for them, no matter how hard the journey. Finally, they reached the destination. Daniel and Marcos exited the taxi with the same quiet demeanor they had entered with. Daniel handed Concepcion a generous tip, and with a nod, the twins disappeared into the night. With a sigh of relief, Concepcion watched them go. She turned to Philippe, who looked at her with sleepy eyes. "Let's go home, my brave boy," she said, her voice filled with love and determination. As they drove home, the city gradually fell into a peaceful slumber, and Concepcion felt a sense of calm wash over her. The day had been long and filled with challenges, but with Philippe by her side, she knew she could face anything. The road ahead might be tough, but Concepcion was resolute in her promise to build a better future for them both. "Good afternoon," greeted Concepcion as the men settled in the back seat next to Philippe, who looked at them curiously. "Good afternoon," the twins responded almost in unison, their voices deep and formal. Concepcion started the car and began driving to the destination indicated by the passengers. As she navigated the city streets, she tried to concentrate on the road, but she couldn't help but notice the twins whispering to each other. Despite her intention to respect their privacy, certain words caught her attention. "Santiago," whispered one of the twins, sending a chill down Concepcion's spine. "We need to watch him," added the other, their voices barely audible but clear enough for Concepcion to hear. Concepcion's heart began to race. Santiago, her ex-husband, was being mentioned in a secretive and alarming conversation. Her mind started spinning with questions and fears. What were these men planning? Was Santiago in some sort of danger? Should she intervene? As she drove, the street seemed to blur as her thoughts spiraled. The name Santiago brought back a flood of memories, both bitter and sweet. She thought about the trials she had endured, the betrayal, and the long journey to rebuild her life. The idea of Santiago being involved in something dangerous unsettled her deeply, not for his sake, but for the potential impact on Philippe. Philippe, sensing his mother's unease, looked up from his toy car and met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked softly, his innocent voice pulling her back to the present moment. "Yes, sweetheart. Everything is fine," Concepcion replied, forcing a reassuring smile, though her heart pounded with anxiety. The twins continued their hushed conversation, oblivious to the turmoil they had stirred within Concepcion. Every whisper seemed to heighten her tension, making it harder to focus on driving. She stole glances at them through the mirror, their serious expressions and low murmurs adding to the air of mystery and threat. Finally, they arrived at the destination. The twins exited the car with the same quiet demeanor they had entered with. One of them handed Concepcion a generous tip, their eyes briefly meeting hers with an unreadable expression. They disappeared into the building, leaving Concepcion with a mix of relief and lingering dread. As she drove away, her mind remained clouded with worry. The conversation she had overheard left her unsettled and anxious. Should she try to warn Santiago? Despite their painful history, he was still the father of her child. But what if involving herself brought danger to Philippe and herself? Lost in thought, Concepcion almost missed Philippe's gentle voice. "Mom, who were those men?" he asked, his curiosity piqued by the unusual passengers. "They were just some passengers, my love," Concepcion replied, trying to sound calm. "Nothing for you to worry about." But as the city lights flickered past and the night grew darker, Concepcion couldn't shake off the unease. She resolved to be cautious and keep her eyes open for any signs of trouble. With Philippe by her side, she knew she had to stay strong and protect him at all costs. Driving home, the weight of the day's events pressed heavily on her shoulders. Concepcion knew that as long as she had Philippe, she could face any challenge. She would stay vigilant, ready to confront whatever lay ahead, for the sake of their safety and future. In an attempt to calm herself, Concepcion slowed the car down, pretending to avoid a pothole on the road. The twins didn't seem to notice her nervousness and continued their hushed conversation. "He must pay for what he did," said one of them, his voice dripping with resentment. Concepcion felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew Santiago had committed terrible wrongs, but the thought of something happening to him, no matter how justified, filled her with a turbulent mix of fear and confusion. Despite the immense pain Santiago had caused her, he was still Philippe's father, and the idea of revenge or harm coming his way was unsettling. Finally, they arrived at the twins' destination, a luxurious hotel in the city center. Concepcion pulled the car to a stop and watched them get out. The men thanked her briefly before heading into the opulent building. She remained seated for a moment, trying to process the ominous words she had overheard. "Mom, why were those men talking about Dad?" Philippe's voice broke the heavy silence, his innocent eyes wide with curiosity. Concepcion looked at her son, striving to maintain her composure. "I don't know, honey, but don't worry. Everything will be okay," she reassured him, though her mind was racing with worry. As they drove away, Concepcion's thoughts swirled with uncertainty and concern. The day's events had left her deeply unsettled. She couldn't ignore the possibility that Santiago might be in danger, but she also had to prioritize Philippe's safety above all else. Returning to their modest home, Concepcion tried to focus on the evening routine. She prepared a simple dinner for Philippe, who chatted happily about his day, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. She listened and smiled, finding solace in his innocence and joy. After tucking Philippe into bed, Concepcion sat alone in the quiet living room. The weight of the day pressed heavily on her, but she knew she needed to stay strong for her son. She contemplated her next steps, torn between reaching out to warn Santiago and keeping her distance to protect Philippe from potential fallout. With a deep sigh, Concepcion made a decision. She would keep an eye out for any further signs of trouble, ready to act if necessary. For now, she needed to focus on their immediate future, ensuring that Philippe felt safe and loved. As she lay down to sleep, Concepcion whispered a silent prayer, hoping for guidance and strength. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Philippe by her side, she felt a renewed sense of determination. Together, they would navigate whatever challenges came their way, holding on to the hope of a better tomorrow. After a few minutes, Concepcion started the car again and headed to their usual spot by the river, where she and Philippe often enjoyed lunch. The tranquil spot by the water provided a much-needed respite from the day's worries. As Philippe eagerly devoured the sandwiches and pancakes his mother had lovingly prepared, Concepcion's mind raced with thoughts of what she should do about the alarming conversation she had overheard. Finally, she resolved to seek advice from someone she trusted. Her friend Patricia came to mind. Patricia, who was always wise and composed, especially in moments of crisis. Concepcion felt certain that Patricia could offer some guidance on how to proceed. With that decision made, Concepcion finished her snack alongside Philippe and began preparing to head home. She recognized the gravity of the next step she needed to take and knew she had to think clearly about how to handle the situation. Her maternal instinct screamed to protect Philippe, yet she also felt a deep moral responsibility to warn Santiago of the looming threat. The drive home was quiet, with Philippe soon falling asleep again in his seat, his little head resting peacefully against the window. Concepcion, on the other hand, was more vigilant than ever, her mind a whirlwind of possible solutions and their respective consequences. She knew a decision had to be made soon, one that could potentially alter the course of their lives and Santiago's. As they pulled into the driveway of their modest home, Concepcion gently woke Philippe, carrying him inside and tucking him into bed. She sat by his side for a moment, watching him breathe peacefully, and felt a surge of determination wash over her. This was for him, for his safety, his future. Once Philippe was settled, Concepcion reached for her phone and dialed Patricia's number. The line rang a few times before Patricia's familiar, calming voice answered. "Patricia, it's Concepcion. I need your help," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course, Concepcion. What's going on?" Patricia's voice was steady and reassuring. Concepcion took a deep breath and recounted the events of the day, including the disturbing conversation she had overheard. Patricia listened intently, occasionally offering a soft word of encouragement, until Concepcion had finished. "You did the right thing by calling me," Patricia said finally. "This is a complicated situation, but we need to think it through carefully. Your priority is Philippe's safety, but I agree that Santiago should be warned. Let's meet tomorrow and discuss it in detail." "Thank you, Patricia. I don't know what I'd do without you," Concepcion said, feeling a glimmer of hope. "You're strong, Concepcion. We'll figure this out together," Patricia assured her. After hanging up, Concepcion felt a bit more at ease. She knew that with Patricia's help, she could navigate this difficult situation. The night was long, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She would protect Philippe and do what was right, no matter the cost. As she lay down to sleep, Concepcion whispered a prayer for guidance and strength. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but she felt a renewed sense of determination. With Philippe by her side and Patricia's support, she was ready to face whatever came next, holding on to the hope of a better tomorrow. As night fell over the city, Concepcion promised herself she would do whatever it took to protect her son and face the challenges ahead. Life hadn't been easy for them, but their love and determination were stronger than any adversity. The sound of the alarm broke the morning silence. Concepcion got out of bed, feeling a heavy weight on her shoulders. The conversation she had overheard the night before still echoed in her mind, filling her with uncertainty. As she prepared breakfast, her thoughts kept shifting between her moral duty and her resentment towards Santiago. "Good morning, Mom," said Philippe, appearing in the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas. "Good morning, my love." "Did you sleep well?" Concepcion asked, forcing a smile. "Yes." "Are we going to work in the taxi today too?" asked Philippe, sitting at the table. "Yes, honey, today too," replied Concepcion, serving breakfast. "But first, we're going to see Aunt Patricia. I need to talk to her." After breakfast, Concepcion and Philippe headed to Patricia's house, a trusted friend and confidant. Patricia was a wise and religious woman, known for her ability to offer advice in difficult times. Concepcion knew that talking to her would help clarify her thoughts. Patricia greeted them with a warm smile and invited them in. Philippe went to play in the garden with Patricia's children, while Concepcion and Patricia sat in the kitchen with cups of hot tea in their hands. "What worries you?" Concepcion asked Patricia, observing her friend's concerned expression. Concepcion took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the previous day. including the unsettling conversation she had overheard in the taxi. She spoke of her fears for Santiago, despite the pain he had caused her, and the overwhelming need to protect Philippe. Patricia listened intently, nodding occasionally as Concepcion poured out her heart. When she finished, Patricia reached across the table and took her friend's hand. "Concepcion, your feelings are completely valid," Patricia began gently. "You have every right to protect Philippe and yourself from any potential harm. But I also understand your sense of moral duty to warn Santiago. It is a difficult balance, but you don't have to face it alone." Concepcion felt a wave of relief wash over her at Patricia's words. "I just don't know what to do. If something happens to Santiago, how will that affect Philippe? But if I warn him, I might be putting us at risk." Patricia squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Let's take this one step at a time. First, we need to ensure your safety and Philippe's. Then, we can figure out the best way to approach Santiago, if that's what you decide to do." Concepcion nodded, feeling a bit more grounded. "Thank you, Patricia. I needed to hear that." "You're welcome, Concepcion. You're strong, and you're doing the best you can. Let's pray for guidance and strength, and take it from there." The two women bowed their heads, and Patricia led a heartfelt prayer, asking for wisdom and protection. The act of praying together brought Concepcion a sense of peace and clarity she hadn't felt in days. After their prayer, Patricia offered more practical advice. "If you decide to warn Santiago, do it in a way that keeps you and Philippe safe, perhaps an anonymous tip or through a third party. You don't have to confront him directly." Concepcion considered this and nodded. "That makes sense. I will think about the best way to do this." Feeling more hopeful and supported, Concepcion thanked Patricia again and called Philippe in from the garden. As they left Patricia's house, Concepcion felt a renewed sense of determination. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Patricia's support and her own unwavering love for Philippe, she felt ready to face whatever challenges came their way. The drive home was filled with a sense of calm determination. Concepcion knew she had to act soon, but for now she focused on the present moment, cherishing the time with Philippe. Together they would navigate this storm, and she was resolved to ensure their safety and happiness above all else. Concepcion took a sip of tea and began to recount the events of the previous day. She told Patricia about the twins, the conversation she had overheard, and her doubts about what to do. The tension in her voice was evident as she spoke. "I don't know what to do, Patricia. Santiago hurt me so much, and yet I feel like I should warn him about the danger. But I'm also afraid of getting more involved than necessary," Concepcion said, tears welling up in her eyes. Patricia listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When Concepcion finished, Patricia took her hands and spoke with a soft but firm voice. "Concepcion, I understand your dilemma. God teaches us to forgive and help everyone, even those who have hurt us. Santiago is the father of your child and deserves to know what might happen. We must do what is right, even if it is difficult. It is not just about him, but also about what you are teaching Philippe about compassion and justice." Patricia's words resonated deeply in Concepcion's heart. She knew her friend was right. Even if Santiago didn't deserve her help, she couldn't let resentment dictate her actions. She had to warn him, even if it was only for Philippe's sake and her own peace of mind. "I know you're right," Patricia Concepcion said, her voice trembling. "But how do I do it without putting Philippe and myself at risk?" "We'll think it through together," Patricia replied reassuringly. "Maybe you can leave an anonymous message or find a way to contact him indirectly. The important thing is that he is warned." Feeling a sense of relief, Concepcion nodded. "Thank you, Patricia. I don't know what I would do without your guidance." Patricia smiled warmly. "You're stronger than you think, Concepcion. You've faced so much already, and you've come out even stronger. We'll get through this together." As they finished their tea, Concepcion felt a newfound clarity and resolve. She knew she had to act, and she was grateful for Patricia's support and wisdom. Leaving Patricia's house, Concepcion called Philippe from the garden. The drive home was filled with a sense of calm determination. Concepcion felt more confident about the steps she needed to take. She still had to decide on the best way to warn Santiago, but she knew she had the support of a true friend and the strength within herself to face whatever lay ahead. Back at home, Concepcion spent some time with Philippe, cherishing the moments of peace and normalcy. That evening, after Philippe had gone to bed, she sat down to compose an anonymous message for Santiago. She chose her words carefully, ensuring the warning was clear, but that her identity remained hidden. With the message ready, she found an anonymous email service and sent it to Santiago, praying that he would heed the warning and that no harm would come to him. As she hit send, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, but also a sense of accomplishment. She had done the right thing. Concepcion lay down to sleep that night with a heart lighter than it had been in days. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but she felt ready to face it with the support of her friends and her unwavering love for Philippe. Together, they would overcome whatever obstacles came their way, holding on to hope for a brighter future. After that conversation, Concepcion thought a lot about that day, but didn't have time to take action because the workday was busy. The next morning arrived with its usual routine. Concepcion got up early, prepared breakfast, and helped Philippe get dressed. The peace she had felt the previous day was still in her heart, but she knew the dilemma with Santiago was not completely resolved. After dropping Philippe off at school, Concepcion headed to her taxi and began her workday. As she drove through the familiar streets, her mind kept returning to the conversation with Patricia. She knew she had to try to warn Santiago again. Even if he didn't listen, at least that way she could be at peace with herself, knowing she had done everything she could. Determined, Concepcion dialed Santiago's number on her phone. The phone rang long and tediously before Santiago finally answered. "What do you want?" Concepcion asked Santiago impatiently. Concepcion took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "Santiago, this isn't about us. It's about something important. I overheard something yesterday that you need to know about." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Santiago spoke again, his tone skeptical. "What are you talking about?" "Listen," Concepcion continued, trying to keep her voice calm and sincere. "I picked up 2 passengers yesterday and I overheard them talking about you. They mentioned your name and something about making you pay for what you did. I don't know the details, but it sounded serious." Santiago's tone shifted slightly, a hint of concern creeping in. "Who were these men?" "I don't know them personally. They were twins, dressed in dark suits. They seemed very serious and determined. I think you should be careful," Concepcion explained, hoping he would take her warning seriously. Santiago was silent for a moment before responding, his voice softer. "Why are you telling me this, Concepcion? After everything that's happened between us, why would you care?" Concepcion closed her eyes, gathering her thoughts. "Because despite everything, you're still Philippe's father. I don't want anything bad to happen to you, for his sake and for my own peace of mind. Just be careful, Santiago." There was another pause, and then Santiago sighed. "All right, Concepcion. I'll keep an eye out. Thank you for letting me know." "You're welcome," Concepcion replied, feeling a mix of relief and lingering worry. "Take care." After hanging up, Concepcion took a deep breath and continued her workday. She had done what she could to warn Santiago, and now it was up to him to heed the warning. As she drove through the city, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had fulfilled her moral duty, and now she could focus on what mattered most, protecting and providing for Philippe. That evening, When Concepcion picked up Philippe from school, she felt a renewed sense of determination. They would face whatever challenges came their way together, with love and resilience guiding them forward. As they drove home, Philippe chattered about his day, and Concepcion listened with a smile, grateful for the moments of normalcy and the bond they shared. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Concepcion knew she had the strength to navigate it. With Philippe by her side and the support of friends like Patricia, she was ready to face whatever the future held, confident in her ability to overcome any obstacle. "Santiago, I need you to listen to me. It's important. I'm not crazy. I'm telling you the truth. Yesterday, I picked up 2 men in my taxi and overheard something that concerns you. They are planning to harm you. I don't know who they are or why, but you need to be careful," said Concepcion, trying to stay calm and be as clear as possible. Santiago scoffed on the other end of the line. "Did you really call me for this? Do you think I'm going to believe your hallucinations? You're crazy, Concepcion. Don't bother me with your nonsense." Concepcion felt a pang of pain in her chest, but forced herself to stay composed. "I just wanted to warn you. Do what you want with the information. Goodbye, Santiago." She hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. She had done the right thing, but Santiago would never change. There was nothing more she could do. As she put away the phone, Concepcion felt a renewed determination. She had fulfilled her moral duty, and now she could focus on what mattered most, taking care of Philippe and moving forward. The rest of the day passed with the usual work routine, but Concepcion felt lighter. Each customer she picked up and dropped off was a reminder that her life was moving forward, and that each small step brought her closer to a better future for herself and Philippe. As evening fell, after picking up Philippe from school, Concepcion decided to take him to a nearby park to relax. Philippe ran to the swings, laughing and playing with other children, while Concepcion watched him with a smile. Seeing her son so happy and carefree gave her the strength to keep going. "Mom, can I go on the slide?" asked Philippe, his eyes bright with excitement. "Sure, my love. Just be careful," replied Concepcion, enjoying Philippe's joy. After a while at the park, Concepcion and Philippe returned to the taxi and headed home. As they drove, Philippe talked about his day at school, the new things he had learned, and the friends he had played with. Concepcion listened attentively, feeling grateful for these simple yet significant moments. They arrived home as the sun was beginning to set. Concepcion prepared dinner while Philippe played in the living room. The tranquility of the evening enveloped them, and Concepcion felt grateful for the peace she had found, even amidst the difficulties. After dinner and putting Philippe to bed, Concepcion stayed a little longer in the living room, reflecting on the day. She knew she had made the right decision by trying to warn Santiago. Even if he hadn't listened, she had done everything within her power, and that gave her a sense of peace and closure. Tomorrow would be another day full of new opportunities and challenges. Concepcion promised herself to continue moving forward with determination and hope, knowing that as long as she had Philippe by her side, there was no obstacle she couldn't overcome. With that conviction in her heart, she turned off the lights and prepared to rest, ready to face whatever the future held. The next morning began like any other. Concepcion woke Philippe, prepared breakfast, and took him to school. However, in another part of the city, Santiago continued with his life, unaware that his days of arrogance were numbered. Daniel and Marcos, the twins Concepcion had picked up in her taxi, were executing their plan with meticulous precision. Daniel, with his ability to read people and innate charisma, had secured a job as a janitor in the office building where Santiago's company was located. Marcos, from the outside, managed logistics and information gathering. Daniel's new position allowed him to move unnoticed, observing Santiago's routines and habits. He quietly collected data, noting the times Santiago arrived and left, his usual routes, and even his interactions with colleagues. Marcos, adept at analysis and strategy, used this information to craft a foolproof plan. Despite the mundane start to her day, Concepcion felt an underlying tension. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was brewing. Yet she pushed these thoughts aside, focusing on her work and ensuring Philippe's happiness. As Concepcion drove her taxi through the city's busy streets, her mind often wandered back to her warning to Santiago. She wondered if he would heed her words or continue dismissing them as nonsense. Her concern for him, despite their tumultuous history, weighed heavily on her heart. She knew that whatever happened next, she had done her part. Meanwhile, Santiago remained oblivious to the looming danger. His arrogance blinded him to the subtle changes around him, the new faces in familiar places. He dismissed Concepcion's warning as another of her attempts to interfere in his life, not realizing the imminent threat that Daniel and Marcos posed. Days turned into weeks, and Concepcion continued her routine with Philippe, finding solace in their small moments of joy and normalcy. Yet the unease never fully left her. She hoped that Santiago would wake up to the danger before it was too late. One evening, after a long day of work, Concepcion received a call. It was Patricia, her voice filled with urgency. "Concepcion, you need to come over." "It's about Santiago," Patricia said, her tone grave. Heart pounding, Concepcion quickly made arrangements for Philippe and headed to Patricia's house. The news she was about to receive would confirm her worst fears and test her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. As she sat with Patricia, listening to the unfolding events, Concepcion realized that her journey was far from over. The challenges ahead were daunting, but she knew she had the strength and support to face them. With Philippe by her side and the unwavering determination in her heart, she was ready to confront whatever lay ahead, fighting for their future and the safety of those she loved. Daniel arrived early at the office, dressed in a janitor's uniform. His movements were careful and precise, ensuring he didn't raise any suspicion. His official task was to clean the offices, but his real objective was much more complex. Using his access to restricted areas, Daniel began gathering evidence of Santiago's fraudulent operations. On his first day, Daniel familiarized himself with the staff and the building. He carefully observed Santiago's movements and those of his close team, identifying vulnerable points and moments when he could act without being seen. His intelligence and patience allowed him to move easily through the environment, gaining the trust of the staff without anyone suspecting his true intentions. Meanwhile, Marcos, from his makeshift office in a rented apartment, worked on deciphering the documents Daniel sent him each night. After Daniel finished his shift, the brothers would meet to review the collected information and plan their next steps. One night, Daniel arrived with a serious expression. "I found something important," he said, handing Marcos an envelope full of documents. Marcos took the envelope and began to review the papers. His eyes widened with surprise and satisfaction as he saw the evidence it contained. "This is enough to bring him down," Marcos said with a smile. "But we need more. We have to make sure there's no way he can escape." Daniel nodded, his face grim. "I know. We need to be thorough. I've noticed a few more areas where we can gather crucial information. It'll take some time, but we can't afford to miss anything." Over the following days, Daniel continued his meticulous surveillance, blending seamlessly into the background of Santiago's office. He used every opportunity to gather documents, listen to conversations, and take note of Santiago's routines. Each night, he would deliver the gathered information to Marcos, who tirelessly pieced together the puzzle. As their plan slowly took shape, the brothers became increasingly aware of the gravity of their mission. They knew that bringing Santiago down would require not only hard evidence, but also strategic timing. They couldn't afford to act prematurely and risk alerting Santiago to their intentions. One evening, Daniel arrived at their meeting place looking more determined than ever. "I've got it," he said, handing Marcos a thick file. "This is the last piece we need. It's all here: financial records, fraudulent transactions, and enough evidence to expose his corruption." Marcos scanned through the file, his eyes lighting up with determination. "This is it," he said. "We have everything we need. Now we need to plan our next move carefully. We have to make sure this information gets into the right hands." The brothers spent the night strategizing their next steps, knowing that the culmination of their efforts was within reach. They planned to anonymously deliver the evidence to authorities, ensuring that Santiago's misdeeds would be exposed without implicating themselves. Meanwhile, Concepcion continued her routine, unaware of the intricate plans unfolding in the shadows. Her days were filled with work and caring for Philippe, her mind occasionally drifting to the warning she had given Santiago. She hoped he had taken her seriously, but she knew there was little more she could do. As the day of reckoning approached, Daniel and Marcos executed their plan with precision. They left the envelope containing all the incriminating evidence at the doorstep of a prominent journalist known for uncovering corruption. The next morning, headlines exploded with Santiago's scandal, and the authorities swiftly moved in to investigate. Concepcion read the news with a mixture of shock and relief. She had done her part, and now justice was taking its course. Santiago's empire began to crumble, and he found himself facing the consequences of his actions. Through it all, Concepcion remained focused on her future with Philippe. The turmoil of the past was finally settling, and she could see a path forward, free from the shadows of Santiago's influence. She felt a sense of closure and a renewed determination to build a better life for her and her son. As the sun set on the horizon, Concepcion and Philippe sat together, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. They were ready to embrace whatever the future held, confident in their resilience and the strength of their bond. With hope in their hearts, they faced the new dawn, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle and build a life filled with love and endless possibilities. Back at the office building, Daniel continued his work, inching closer to dismantling Santiago's empire. He had managed to access Santiago's safe and took photographs of key documents proving the frauds and scams Santiago had carried out over the years. It was a dangerous game, but Daniel knew it was necessary to achieve justice. One day, while cleaning Santiago's office, Daniel overheard a phone conversation that caught his attention. Santiago was talking to someone about suspicious bank transfers and how to hide certain transactions from the authorities. Daniel, with his keen ear, memorized every word, knowing this information would be crucial for their plan. That night, Daniel shared the new information with Marcos. "We have what we need. Now we just need the final execution," Daniel said with determination. Marcos nodded, knowing the moment of truth was approaching. "We have to be careful. One wrong step and everything will fall apart." Meanwhile, Concepcion continued with her daily routine, unaware of the twins' plan. She had done the right thing by warning Santiago, and now her focus was on taking care of Philippe and ensuring a better future for them. However, fate had its own plans, and soon Concepcion would find herself drawn back into the unfolding plot around her. The day of the final execution arrived. Daniel and Marcos were ready to make their move. With all the collected information, they contacted the authorities and presented the evidence of Santiago's crimes. They knew justice was on their side, but they also understood the risks involved. The police, armed with the evidence, planned a raid on Santiago's office. As the police prepared for the raid, Concepcion received an unexpected call. It was from an anonymous number, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Daniel. "Concepcion, I know this is sudden, but you need to be aware of something," Daniel began, his voice urgent. "Santiago is about to be exposed for his crimes, but we need your help to ensure Philippe's safety." Concepcion's heart raced. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Daniel quickly explained the situation. We have all the evidence against Santiago, but things could get dangerous. We need to make sure Philippe is out of harm's way. Can you take him somewhere safe?" Concepcion didn't hesitate. "Of course. I'll do whatever it takes to protect him." As the conversation ended, Concepcion's mind whirled with the sudden turn of events. She quickly gathered Philippe and a few essential belongings, making plans to stay with Patricia until the dust settled. She explained to Philippe that they were going on an unexpected adventure, doing her best to keep him calm and unaware of the danger. Meanwhile, the police raided Santiago's office. Daniel and Marcos watched from a distance as officers stormed the building, seizing documents and arresting Santiago. The raid was swift and decisive, and Santiago's empire began to crumble under the weight of his crimes. News of Santiago's arrest spread quickly, and Concepcion felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She knew the ordeal was far from over, but she took comfort in knowing that justice was being served. As she and Philippe settled in at Patricia's home, she found solace in the support of her friend and the safety of her son. In the following days, the evidence against Santiago was made public, and the extent of his fraudulent activities shocked the community. Concepcion watched the news, feeling a sense of closure as Santiago's wrongdoings were laid bare. She knew that this was just the beginning of a long legal process, but she was grateful for the efforts of Daniel and Marcos. As life slowly returned to normal, Concepcion focused on rebuilding her life and creating a stable future for Philippe. The trials of the past had strengthened her resolve, and she was determined to move forward with hope and resilience. One evening, as she watched Philippe play in the garden, Concepcion felt a deep sense of peace. The storm had passed, and the future stretched out before them, filled with promise and possibility. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but with Philippe by her side and the support of friends like Patricia, she was ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would build a life of love and security, leaving the shadows of Santiago's influence behind. The journey had been long and arduous, but Concepcion's unwavering strength and determination had carried them through. With each passing day, she grew more confident in their ability to overcome any obstacle and create a brighter future for themselves. As the sun set on another day, Concepcion whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, embracing the newfound peace in their lives. She knew that with love, hope, and resilience, they could achieve anything they set their hearts to, and the best was yet to come. Daniel, still working as a janitor, ensured everything was in place to facilitate the operation. Marcos, from his office, coordinated with the officers, making sure every detail was covered. The day passed with a tense calm. Santiago, unaware of the impending danger, went about his daily activities. However, the calm was shattered when the police stormed the office, arresting Santiago and several of his associates for their numerous crimes. At the end of her workday, Concepcion learned of the news through a television newscast in a nearby store. The images showed Santiago being led away in handcuffs, his arrogance finally defeated. Philippe, seeing his father on the screen, pointed at it excitedly, not fully understanding the gravity of the situation. Concepcion, surprised but relieved, knew that justice had finally caught up with Santiago. The empire he had built on lies and fraud was crumbling, and although the future remained uncertain, there was a sense of closure and justice in the air. Santiago's chapter was coming to an end, and for Concepcion and Philippe, a new chapter of hope and opportunity was beginning to open. Concepcion knew there were still many challenges ahead, but with each obstacle overcome, they were closer to a bright and promising future. As she and Philippe walked home, Concepcion couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The pain and betrayal, the long hours working as a taxi driver, and the constant struggle to make ends meet, all of it had led to this moment of vindication. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, replaced by a renewed sense of determination. At home, Concepcion explained to Philippe in simple terms what had happened. "Your father did some things that were not right, and now he has to face the consequences. But we are safe, and we will keep moving forward together." Philippe nodded, sensing the importance of his mother's words, even if he didn't fully grasp their meaning. "Will we be okay, Mom?" Concepcion smiled, hugging him tightly. "Yes, my love, we will be more than okay. We have each other, and that's all we need." In the following days, Concepcion felt a mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a lingering sadness for the family that had been fractured by Santiago's actions. She focused on her work and on providing a stable environment for Philippe. She continued to stay in touch with Patricia, whose support remained invaluable during this time of transition. One evening, while sitting in the living room after dinner, Concepcion received a call from Daniel. His voice was calm, but carried a sense of closure. "Concepcion, I just wanted you to know that everything is taken care of. Santiago will face justice for his actions." "Thank you, Daniel." For everything, Concepcion replied, feeling a deep gratitude for the role he had played in bringing Santiago to justice. "Take care of yourself and Philippe. You both deserve peace and happiness," Daniel said before hanging up. As the days turned into weeks, the media frenzy surrounding Santiago's arrest began to die down. Concepcion and Philippe settled into a new rhythm of life, one that was no longer overshadowed by the fear and uncertainty of Santiago's influence. Concepcion continued to work hard, but she also made time for moments of joy and relaxation with Philippe. They visited parks, went on small trips, and built a life filled with love and laughter. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together in the park, Philippe looked up at his mother with a smile. "Mom, do you think we can have that garden with flowers you talked about?" Concepcion's heart swelled with hope and determination. "Yes, my love. One day we will have our garden, and it will be beautiful." With each passing day, Concepcion felt more confident in her ability to create a stable and loving home for Philippe. The challenges they had faced had only made them stronger, and she knew that together they could overcome anything. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now gleamed with the promise of endless possibilities. As the sun set on another day, Concepcion whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, embracing the newfound peace in their lives. She knew that with love, hope, and resilience, they could achieve anything they set their hearts to, and the best was yet to come. While Santiago was being processed by the authorities, the office that had been the epicenter of his fraudulent activities was in chaos. Surprised and frightened employees were scattered, murmuring among themselves about what had happened. Beatrice, Santiago's lover and accomplice, couldn't believe what was happening. Beatrice had always been astute and careful, suspecting anyone who might threaten her comfortable position alongside Santiago. She had noticed Daniel from the beginning, but had never been able to gather concrete evidence that he was more than just a janitor. However, her paranoia grew as investigations and rumors began to close in on Santiago. Determined to uncover the truth, Beatrice reviewed the security camera recordings she had installed in the office, focusing especially on the moments when Daniel was alone in Santiago's office. What she saw left her speechless. Daniel rummaging through Santiago's safe, taking photographs of documents, and gathering evidence. Anger and betrayal consumed her. "Damn traitor," Beatrice shouted, pounding the desk with her fists. She knew she had to act quickly. Santiago was in trouble, and she was also in danger if she couldn't clear her name. Beatrice immediately called Santiago but got no response. Her mind began to race, devising a plan to confront Daniel and save herself. Meanwhile, Daniel, unaware that he had been discovered, continued his routine, confident that everything was going according to plan. That afternoon, Beatrice confronted Daniel in the empty office, her imposing presence and cold eyes revealing that she knew more than he imagined. "Daniel, or should I call you a spy?" Beatrice said coldly, blocking the office door. Daniel remained calm, but his eyes reflected caution. "I don't know what you're talking about, Beatrice. I'm just doing my job." Beatrice laughed bitterly. I've seen the recordings. I know you were snooping in Santiago's safe. Who do you work for? What were you looking for? Daniel realized he could no longer hide the truth. I was looking for justice, Beatrice. Santiago has committed too many crimes, and it's time he paid for them. Before Beatrice could respond, the police burst into the office, arresting her on suspicion of complicity in Santiago's crime. The evidence collected by Daniel had been enough to incriminate her as well. Beatrice screamed and struggled as they took her away, cursing Daniel and Santiago for their betrayal. Daniel watched the scene with a mix of relief and satisfaction. They had achieved their goal, but not without cost. He knew he had risked a lot, but it was worth it to dismantle Santiago and Beatrice's corrupt empire. Meanwhile, Concepcion and Felipe continued with their daily lives. That night, upon seeing the news, Concepcion learned of Beatrice's arrest. Felipe, sitting next to her, watched the screen curiously. "Mom, why are they taking that lady away?" Felipe asked. Concepcion explained as simply as possible. "She worked with your dad and did bad things too. Now the police are taking her to answer for what she did." Felipe nodded, though he didn't fully understand the situation's magnitude. Concepcion hugged him tightly, grateful that despite everything, they were safe and together. The following days were filled with changes and adjustments. With Santiago and Beatrice in custody, the company began to collapse. Innocent employees looked for new opportunities, while those involved in fraudulent activities faced legal consequences. Daniel and Marcos met to discuss the next steps. They knew their mission wasn't completely over, but they were satisfied with the progress. "We did it, brother. Santiago is where he belongs, and so is Beatrice," Marcos said with a satisfied smile. "Yes, but now we need to make sure Concepcion and Felipe are okay. They've suffered a lot because of Santiago. It's time they had some peace and stability," Daniel replied. With that conviction, Daniel and Marcos decided to contact Concepcion. They wanted to inform her about the state of things and offer their support. They knew she had been another victim of Santiago's manipulations and wanted to help her reclaim what was rightfully hers. One day, while Concepcion was picking up Felipe from school, she received a call from Daniel. At first, she hesitated to answer but decided to hear what he had to say. "Hello, Concepcion. It's Daniel. I wanted to talk to you about what's been happening. I know you've suffered a lot, and I want to help you recover what's yours," Daniel said, his voice full of sincerity. Concepcion, surprised, decided to give him a chance. They agreed to meet at a nearby cafe the next day to talk calmly. She knew this meeting could be a turning point in her and Felipe's lives. That night, Concepcion went to bed with a mix of hope and anxiety. She knew the road ahead was still uncertain, but she was willing to face it with courage. With Felipe by her side and the unexpected support of Daniel and Marcos, she felt they could finally start building a better future. The cafe was quiet that morning, with only a few scattered customers at the tables. Concepcion arrived early, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. She had decided to trust Daniel, though she wasn't entirely sure of his intentions. Felipe, unaware of the seriousness of the meeting, was excited about the chance to eat a pastry. Shortly after, Daniel and Marcos arrived together. Both were dressed casually, with a relaxed attitude that helped calm Concepcion's nerves. After the initial greetings and introductions, they sat at a table away from the hustle and bustle. "Concepcion, thank you for coming. We know this is a bit overwhelming," Daniel began the conversation. "Yes, but I think it's important to talk about everything that has happened," Concepcion responded, taking a cup of tea that Marcos had offered her. Marcos nodded and took out a folder from his briefcase, placing it on the table. "In this folder, there is all the information we've gathered about Santiago and his fraudulent activities. We've worked for months to gather enough evidence to ensure justice is served." Concepcion looked at the folder with astonishment and some apprehension. "What's in those documents? Daniel took the lead. There are bank records, fraudulent transfers, forged documents, and witness statements. Everything we needed to ensure Santiago and Beatriz were arrested and prosecuted. Marcos continued, and we've also found proof that the house and some other assets Santiago took from you legally belong to you. We want to help you get them back. Concepcion felt a mix of relief and gratitude. I don't know how to thank you for all this. You've done so much for me and Philippe. Daniel smiled. You don't need to thank us. Santiago hurt us too, and we want to make sure no one else suffers because of him. Besides, we believe you deserve a fresh start. As they talked, Beatriz was being interrogated by the police. Her initial arrogance had been replaced by a cold determination to save herself at all costs. Under pressure and fear, Beatriz decided to cooperate with the authorities, revealing additional details about Santiago's operations and others involved. Her testimony, added to the evidence Daniel and Marcos had provided, further strengthened the case against Santiago. Back at the cafe, Concepcion began to feel a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long time. However, she still had questions. And what about you two? How can I repay you? Marcos shook his head. We're not here to ask for anything in return. We want you to focus on yourself and Philippe. If you need help facing all this, we'll be here to support you. Concepcion felt overwhelmed by the twins' generosity and kindness. Thank you truly. Thank you for everything. They spent the next few hours discussing the details and the steps to follow. Daniel and Marcos explained how to proceed with the legal paperwork to recover the house and other assets. They also offered to connect her with lawyers who could help her navigate the judicial process. As the conversation progressed, Concepcion began to feel more confident and optimistic. She knew the road ahead would be long and complicated, but with Daniel and Marcos' support, she felt she could face it with courage. After the meeting, Concepcion and Philippe returned home. Philippe was happy with his pastry, while Concepcion reflected on everything she had learned. That night, after putting Philippe to bed, she allowed herself to dream of a better future. She visualized the possibility of recovering her home, of having a stable and secure life for her son. In the following days, Concepcion began working with the lawyers recommended by Daniel and Marcos. The legal procedures progressed slowly, but with each small step, she felt closer to reclaiming what had been taken from her. The determination she had felt from the beginning remained her guide, and the twins' support gave her the strength to keep going. Meanwhile, Santiago faced a series of hearings and statements. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his usual arrogance faded as the reality of his situation became evident. Each day that passed, his empire crumbled more, and justice approached to claim its due. The arrest of Beatriz and Santiago's downfall resonated in the community. Former partners and employees began to distance themselves, trying to save themselves from the storm that was coming. The company that had once been Santiago's pride was now synonymous with corruption and deceit. For Concepcion, each news about the case was a reminder of the importance of continuing to fight. She knew the road would still be long, but she had the conviction and support needed to face any obstacle. With Philippe by her side and the unexpected help of Daniel and Marcos, she was ready to rebuild her life and ensure her son had a bright future. While preparing for another day, Concepcion looked at Philippe, who was playing happily in the living room. She felt a wave of love and determination. She knew that no matter what came, they would move forward together, and with each step they took, they got closer to the future they had always dreamed of. The meeting at the cafe with Concepcion had been a crucial moment, not only for her but also for Daniel and Marcos. Although Concepcion was grateful for their support, she didn't yet fully understand why the twins were so determined to help her. That day, after Concepcion and Philippe left, Daniel and Marcos stayed in the cafe, reflecting on the journey that had brought them there. Daniel looked at his brother and began to speak in a low voice, as if unearthing painful memories. Marcos, "Do you remember our parents and how we lost everything because of Santiago?" Marcos nodded, his face hardened by sadness and contained anger. "Yes, Daniel, I remember how everything started to fall apart when Santiago came into our lives. Our parents trusted him, and he took advantage of that trust to steal everything they had." Daniel and Marcos had grown up in a modest but happy family. Their parents, tireless workers, had saved for years to invest in a small business they dreamed of turning into a legacy for their children. However, everything changed when Santiago, with his charm and empty promises, presented himself as a successful businessman willing to help them expand their business. I remember the nights our parents talked excitedly about the expansion plans, not knowing that Santiago was deceiving them. Daniel continued, his voice full of bitterness. Santiago had convinced Daniel and Marco's parents to invest in a series of fraudulent projects. He used forged documents and manipulated financial records to make it seem like the business was thriving. However, when debts began to accumulate and income disappeared, the truth came to light. Santiago had diverted the funds for his own purposes, leaving Daniel and Marco's family in ruin. "Our parents never recovered from that betrayal," Marcos said, tears in his eyes. "They lost the house, the business, and eventually their health. Mom fell into depression, and Dad died of a heart attack a few months later." Daniel squeezed his brother's hand, sharing the pain and anger. "That's when we swore we wouldn't let Santiago keep destroying lives. We dedicated years to investigating his frauds and gathering evidence. But we also saw how other people suffered because of him, and that pushed us even more." When Daniel and Marcos learned about Concepcion's situation, they knew they couldn't stand by. They saw in her a strong and brave woman who had been a victim of the same person who had destroyed their family. Their desire to help her came not only from a sense of justice, but also from empathy and solidarity. "Concepcion is like our parents, a good and hard-working person who just wanted a better life for her family," Daniel said. "We couldn't let Santiago get away with it again, and by helping her, we also feel like we're doing justice for our parents." Marcos nodded, his determination even stronger. "Exactly. Helping Concepcion isn't just a way to get back at Santiago, but also to honor our parents' memory. We want to make sure she and Felipe have the opportunity we never had, to regain what was taken from them." The decision to help Concepcion had become a personal mission for the twins. It wasn't just about taking down Santiago, but repairing the damage he had caused to so many families. Concepcion and Felipe represented a chance for redemption and a demonstration that justice and kindness could prevail over evil and greed. Back at her home, Concepcion, although she still didn't know all the details of Daniel and Marco's story, could feel the sincerity and commitment in each of their actions. She knew she had found genuine allies, and for the first time in a long time, felt safe and supported. Daniel and Marcos continued to support Concepcion every step of the legal process, using their experience and knowledge to ensure she regained everything Santiago had taken from her. Their relationship with Concepcion strengthened, becoming a friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. Finally, when the process was over and Concepcion reclaimed her home and started building a better future for Felipe, Daniel and Marcos felt an inner peace they hadn't experienced in a long time. They had kept their promise not to let Santiago keep destroying lives, and in doing so, they had found a new family in Concepcion and Felipe. With the weight of the past finally lifted from their shoulders, Daniel and Marcos could look forward with hope, knowing they had done the right thing and honored their parents' memory in the best way possible. The day had arrived with unusual clarity and freshness. Concepcion, sitting in the kitchen of her new home, still couldn't believe she had finally reclaimed the house that was rightfully hers. Emotion and gratitude filled her as she prepared breakfast for Felipe. Her mind, however, was elsewhere, recalling recent events and the trial that had finally closed a painful chapter of her life. Felipe ran into the kitchen, his contagious energy filling the air. Mom, today is our first full day in the new house, right?" Concepcion smiled, looking at her son with tenderness. "Yes, my love. This is our home, and we're going to make every day here special." As they had breakfast, the sound of the news on the background television caught Concepcion's attention. Images of Santiago's trial and Beatrice's arrest appeared on the screen. Felipe, though he didn't fully understand the situation's gravity, watched curiously. "Mom, why are they talking about Dad on TV again?" Felipe asked, his eyes fixed on the screen. Concepcion took a deep breath. "Felipe, there are things your dad did that were wrong, and now he's facing the consequences of those actions. But what's important is that we're here together, and we're going to be okay." After breakfast, Concepcion decided it was time to visit Patricia. She felt the need to share her joy and gratitude with her friend who had stood by her during the toughest times. She called Patricia and agreed to meet at the nearby park. Upon arriving at the park, Concepcion saw Patricia waiting on her usual bench. Patricia's warm smile welcomed her, and Concepcion immediately felt comforted. "Concepcion," Felipe, Patricia exclaimed, getting up to hug them. "So good to see you. How has everything been?" "Much better, Patricia. I wanted to thank you for all your support and advice." "I couldn't have made it here without you," Concepcion said, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Patricia held her hands firmly. "Concepcion, you are a strong and brave woman. You've overcome so much, and now you're where you deserve to be. I'm so proud of you." Felipe, unaware of the seriousness of the conversation, ran to the playground. Concepcion and Patricia watched him with a smile, enjoying the moment of peace and normalcy. "Patricia, I wanted to tell you something else," Concepcion said, turning to her friend. "Daniel and Marcos have been incredible. Not only did they help me recover the house, but they've also supported me throughout this process. I don't know how I can ever thank them." Patricia nodded, understanding the depth of Concepcion's gratitude. Sometimes God places the right people in our path at the right moments. They also found a way to redeem their own stories through you. It's a blessing for everyone. As they talked, Daniel and Marcos arrived at the park, responding to Concepcion's invitation. They joined them on the bench, sharing stories and laughter. The atmosphere was a mix of relief and hope, with the future shining with renewed promises. "Concepcion, we have something else we want to tell you," Daniel said, breaking the silence that had settled after a round of laughter. Marcos continued, "We want you to know that we'll always be here for you and Felipe, not just as friends but as family. You've been through a lot, and we want to make sure you never have to face anything alone again." Concepcion felt a lump in her throat, but this time it was from joy and gratitude. "Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Marcos. You are part of our family now, too." The afternoon passed quickly, filled with games and deep conversations. Felipe, exhausted but happy, fell asleep on Concepcion's lap while the adults continued talking. There was a sense of closure, but also of new beginnings. As night fell, Concepcion and Felipe returned home. Concepcion tucked Felipe into his new bed, covering him carefully. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, watching her son sleep peacefully. "We did it, Felipe. We're home," she whispered, a smile of satisfaction on her face. Before going to bed, Concepcion allowed herself a few moments to reflect on everything that had happened. The challenges, the pain, the struggle, and finally the justice. She felt an inner peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Tomorrow will be a new day, she thought as she turned off the lights. And with the support of our friends and our new family, I know we can face anything. With that conviction, Concepcion settled into bed, ready for a well-deserved rest. She knew the future still held challenges, but she was prepared to face them with courage and hope, knowing she would never be alone again. And so, with the weight of the past finally lifted from her shoulders, she fell asleep with a heart full of gratitude and a mind free to dream of a bright and love-filled future. The day of the final verdict against Santiago arrived with an air of anticipation and gravity that could be felt in every corner of the courtroom. Concepcion, though not present in the room, followed the events with a mix of hope and anxiety. Santiago's fall was imminent, but the severity of his punishment was yet to be decided. In the courtroom, Santiago sat at the stand with handcuffs on, his face hardened by a mix of desperation and defiance. He had lost all his power and control, and now faced the reality of his actions. The room was filled with journalists, victims of his frauds, and people interested in the trial's outcome. The judge, a man with a severe gaze and imposing presence, called the room to order. The prosecutor stood up, carrying a stack of documents detailing Santiago's crimes. He began to speak with a firm and clear voice. "Mr. Santiago, you have been found guilty of multiple charges, including financial fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and large-scale swindling. Your actions have not only caused incalculable financial damage, but also significant emotional suffering to numerous victims." The prosecutor presented each piece of evidence with meticulous precision: bank records showing illegal transfers, forged documents used to deceive investors, and witness statements describing the devastating impact of Santiago's crimes. As each piece of evidence was exposed, the gravity of his actions became more evident. "Your crimes reflect not only a complete lack of ethics and morality, but also a deliberate intent to harm others for your own gain," the prosecutor continued. "You have manipulated, deceived, and destroyed lives without showing any remorse." The judge listened attentively, his expression remaining unchanged. When the prosecutor finished, the judge turned his gaze to Santiago, who tried to maintain an appearance of calm. "Santiago, this court has no choice but to impose a sentence that reflects the severity of your crimes and the impact they have had on the lives of your victims," the judge said, his voice resonating in the room. "Your actions have demonstrated a lack of respect for the law and humanity itself. Justice must be served." The judge paused, letting his words sink into Santiago and everyone present. "In consideration of the magnitude of your crimes and the lack of remorse demonstrated, this court sentences you to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, you are ordered to make full restitution of the defrauded funds to your victims with interest." The room was silent. Santiago slumped in his chair, his face reflecting desperation and the realization that his life as he knew it was over. The severity of the sentence was unappealable, and he knew there was no escape. Meanwhile, Concepcion followed the trial from her home, alongside Philippe. Upon hearing the sentence, she felt a mix of relief and justice. Santiago, the man who had destroyed so many lives, including hers and her son's, would finally face the consequences of his actions. Philippe, noticing his mother's reaction, approached her. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked with concern. Concepcion hugged him tightly, feeling a peace she hadn't known in a long time. "Yes, my love, I'm okay. Everything will be okay now." Santiago's arrest and the severity of his sentence resonated in the community. Those who had been victims of his frauds felt a collective relief, knowing that justice had finally been served. The media extensively covered the case, describing Santiago as the perfect example of how power and greed can corrupt a person. In the following days, Concepcion and Philippe began to adapt to their new life in the home they had reclaimed. With Daniel and Marco's support, they focused on rebuilding their life and finding a new normal. The shadow of Santiago had vanished, and a future full of possibilities lay ahead. One afternoon, while Philippe played in the garden, Concepcion sat on the porch, reflecting on everything that had happened. Daniel and Marcos joined her, sitting by her side in silence. There was no need to speak, they all understood the importance of the moment. "Thank you, Daniel." "Thank you, Marcos." "I couldn't have made it here without you," Concepcion said, her voice full of gratitude. "You don't need to thank us, Concepcion. We're glad we could help," Daniel responded, smiling. Marcos nodded. "What matters is that now you have a new opportunity. Make the most of each day and build the life you always deserved." Concepcion looked at Philippe, who laughed and played with other neighborhood children. She felt deep gratitude and renewed determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with her friend's support and the strength she had found within herself, she was ready to face any challenge. With the weight of the past finally lifted from their shoulders, Concepcion and Philippe looked to the future with hope and confidence. Justice had prevailed, and now they could begin to build a life filled with love, security, and fulfilled promises. Concepcion sat on the porch of her new home, watching the sun slowly set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It was a peaceful afternoon, and the cool air brought a sense of renewal. Philippe played in the garden, his laughter filling the air and reminding Concepcion how lucky she was to have her son by her side. As she watched Philippe, her mind began to wander, returning to the years she had spent with Santiago. She remembered the early days of their relationship when everything seemed perfect and full of promise. Santiago was charming, ambitious, and full of dreams. Together, they had imagined a bright future full of love and success. But over time, Santiago's ambition had turned into greed, and his love had turned into control. Betrayal and pain followed, culminating in a devastating divorce that left her with nothing. During those dark moments, Concepcion had felt her world falling apart. Melancholy had enveloped her, and each day was a struggle to move forward. However, in the midst of that storm, she had found an inner strength she never knew she had. Life, with all its trials and challenges, had forced her to grow, adapt, and fight for a better future for herself and Philippe. Despite the pain and betrayal, Concepcion had learned to forgive, not only Santiago but also herself for past mistakes. She remembered Patricia's words, who had always spoken to her about the importance of forgiveness and resilience. "God gives us trials to make us stronger," Patricia had told her many times. And now, looking back, Concepcion could see the truth in those words. Each obstacle, each moment of despair, had led her to this point in her life, where she could finally find peace and happiness. Concepcion sighed, feeling a mix of melancholy and relief. It had been a long and painful journey, but also one of growth and rediscovery. Santiago was a part of her past, a hard but necessary lesson. Although she couldn't forget the pain he had caused her, she also couldn't ignore the lessons she had learned from that experience. Reflecting on how life, despite its challenges, had given her the chance to move forward, she realized that Daniel and Marcos had been guardian angels, appearing at just the right moment to offer support and friendship. With their help, she had not only reclaimed her home but also her dignity and sense of purpose. Concepcion stood up from the porch and walked to the garden, where Philippe was playing happily. She knelt down and hugged him tightly, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. Philippe, surprised but happy, hugged her back. "I love you so much, Mom," Philippe said, smiling. "I love you so much too, my love. You are my reason for being, and together we're going to have a wonderful life," Concepcion responded, tears of happiness in her eyes. As she watched Philippe continue playing, Concepcion realized it was time to close the chapter of the past and open a new one filled with hope and possibilities. Life had shown her that no matter how dark the times were, there was always light at the end of the tunnel. That light was in her son's smile, in Daniel and Marco's friendship, and in the peace she felt in her heart. With unwavering determination, Concepcion resolved to treat every single day as a jubilant tribute to her strength and the abundant blessings she had been granted. She had bravely faced and surmounted countless trials, and now, with the heavy burdens of her past finally shed, she stood poised to create a future brimming with love, joy, and the fulfillment of long-awaited dreams. Concepien's journey was not merely a testament to her triumph over hardship, but a shining beacon of hope, proving that life, despite its unexpected turns, always presents a chance for renewal. With this renewed hope, Concipien and Philippe gazed into the future, their hearts intertwined with the unshakable belief that together, they could conquer any obstacle and forge a life imbued with boundless love and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon and a new dawn loomed on the horizon, Concipien felt an overwhelming sense of strength and gratitude enveloping her. She had rediscovered her path, and with every step forward, she drew nearer to the life she had always envisioned, a life teeming with love, security, and the realization of every cherished promise. In this new chapter, the past had become a faint shadow, and the future stretched out before her, filled with infinite possibilities and unbridled potential. In those quiet moments of reflection, Concipien felt a profound connection to the present and an unwavering faith in the future. The trials and tribulations that had once seemed insurmountable now stood as mere stepping stones, leading her toward a destiny shaped by resilience and love. Each challenge she overcame with Philippe by her side fortified her spirit and reaffirmed her belief in the power of perseverance. The days that followed were filled with purposeful actions and renewed optimism. Concipien continued to work diligently, each day bringing her closer to her goals. Philippe's laughter and joy became her greatest motivation, infusing her with the strength to push forward even on the toughest days. She no longer viewed her struggles as burdens, but as opportunities to grow and thrive. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Philippe turned to her with a bright smile. "Mom, do you think we'll ever have our own garden full of flowers?" Concipien hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with love and determination. "Yes, my love. One day we will have our garden, and it will be more beautiful than we can imagine." With each passing day, Concipien and Philippe's bond grew stronger, their shared dreams and aspirations lighting their path. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now glimmered with the promise of joy and fulfillment. They had learned that true strength comes from within, and that with love and hope, anything is possible. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Concipien made a silent vow to herself and Philippe. She promised to embrace each new day with gratitude and courage, to face every challenge with unwavering resolve, and to cherish the precious moments they shared. She knew that together they could build a life filled with happiness, love, and endless possibilities. And so, as they drifted off to sleep, the world outside their window seemed a little brighter, the future a little more certain. Concepien's heart was light, her spirit unbreakable, and her love for Philippe the guiding force that would lead them to a life of boundless joy and fulfilled dreams. As we close this chapter on Concepien's incredible journey, we witness how she turned hardship into hope. After her wealthy husband left her with nothing, Concipien faced the challenge of starting over as a taxi driver, all while caring for her young son. Her story is a testament to resilience, love, and the courage to rebuild one's life from the ground up. What has Concepien's journey taught you about facing adversity and embracing new beginnings? Share with us one key lesson you've learned and how you plan to apply it in your own life. Leave your comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this video has inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more uplifting stories and content. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to bring you impactful and motivational content. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to your reflections and connecting with you in the comments.